Hi there, welcome to my first Christmas card tutorial for 2013. I hope to fit in many more before Santa arrives. I only recently learnt how to make this pop-up slider card, and so I wanted to design a card so I could teach it to my class, which is coming up on Friday, and this is the card that I came up with, and I thought I'd video a tutorial at the same time because I'm pretty sure this pop-up slider card lends itself to lots of different styles of card, not just Christmas cards. So any Christmas image, a few snowflake stamps and a couple of greetings, and you're good to go. So the first things you need to do is cut out your cardstock. So you need one piece of blue cardstock or any colour of your choice, and that measures 5 3/4 inches by 8 inches. And then you need a white piece of cardstock, which is going to be the underneath part of the card, which measures exactly the same, 5 3/4 by 8 inches. So they should be exactly the same size. Then you need your next piece of card, which is going to form your tab. Now you're going to cut it at 4 inches by 7 inches, but you will need to trim a little bit away at the end, but I think it's better than having a tab that's a little bit too short. And the final two pieces of card is one piece of black card that measures 3 5/8 of an inch by 5 inches, and the white card, which we're going to stamp on, measures 3 3/8 of an inch by 4 3/4 inches. I'm using a black archival ink by Ranger to stamp the images on my card. And I'm going to start out by stamping all over this piece of blue cardstock just a random pattern of snowflakes. So you can use any snowflakes that you might have in your stash to do this. I'm not the world's best stamper, as you'll see, but I always like stamping in black because there's always the option of finishing any duff images that you stamp with a black pen. So it's only smudges you can't really do anything about. But if you make a little mistake like I have here, where the image isn't quite as dark all over as you might want it to be, you just need to get out a fine black marker and just draw over the stamp, and no one will ever know. I'm using 3 different stamps to create my little random pattern of snowflakes. So any snowflakes that you might have in your stash will work fine. Even though I'm creating a random pattern of snowflakes, I do tend to group some of the snowflakes together, and it just adds to the overall effect. And don't forget to stamp some of your snowflakes off the edges of your cardstock. So once your ink is dry, you're ready to flip your card over, and then you need a pencil and a ruler to mark out where we're going to cut the slider for your card. If you're lucky enough to have a Tim Holtz ruler like mine, well, not exactly like mine because mine's looking a bit the worse for wear these days, but a ruler that has a grid on it, then you can line it up an inch from the edge of your card, and you're going to draw a line that starts an inch in from the top and down to an inch from the bottom. So what we're trying to do is create a frame all the way around the edge of the card. So I'm going to show you another way, if you're not lucky enough to have one of these rulers, where you can just measure an inch up from one edge of the card. So I like to do it in 3 places to make sure that we can line the ruler up across these marks, and then you're just going to do exactly that. Line the ruler up with the 1 inch marks and just draw a line to start the creation of a border across the bottom of the card. And you're going to repeat that either using the Tim Holtz ruler method or the little 3 marks method, and you're going to create a 1 inch frame all the way around your card. But once you have your 1 inch frame, then you're going to measure up from the bottom of the frame with the card in the portrait position. You're going to make another line. This time just make it a dotted line. So remember, this isn't a cutting line, it's going to be a scoring line, 3/4 of an inch up from that bottom mark. And then the area that you've got left is going to be divided in half. So you're going to make another set of 3 marks at 2.5 inches, and then you're going to join them together again with a dotted line because this is going to be a scored line. So you're going to cut a U shape now with your craft knife, and then the other 3 lines are going to be score lines. So take a metal edge ruler and your craft knife and carefully cut down 1 inch from the top to 1 inch from the bottom. Then cut along the bottom section of the card, and then one final cut and so you've effectively cut a U shape with your craft knife. And then the other 3 lines that you've got left are going to be scored. So I find it best when I want a crease that I'm going to fold on to use a small ended ball tool. So place your ruler on the pencil dotted lines that you drew earlier and score 3 times across your card. Then carefully erase all your working outlines. And we're ready to begin folding this slider into position. So starting work from the front of the card, the first fold you're going to make a valley fold, the second fold you're going to make a mountain fold, and the third fold is a valley fold. And you just want to make sure that you crease those down well with your fingers, and you can see the pop-up part of this card beginning to take shape. Next we're going to mark the position or the centre of the card. So we know it's 5 3/4 inches, so 2 7/8 of an inch. Just put a little pencil mark, and then you're going to use a circle punch, and I've got a 1.5 inch circle punch, but unfortunately it won't punch through both layers of the card. If yours will, you can do this in one go, but mine won't, so I'm going to do them one at a time. So I'm going to be punching my blue card first, so I'm just going to centre that mark and then just drop the circle punch down enough to make a little tabbed top so that you can get hold of the tag slider once it's in position. And then you're going to repeat that on the white card if you're going to have to do it singly like me, and use a pencil to trace around your first cut onto the white card and then line it up inside your punch, and we should have 2 matching sections from the white and the blue card. So the white card forms the base and the blue card is the top. Next we want to stamp the greeting that will be revealed when we pull the tab on our slider card. So you just want to again take a pencil, line up the bottom and the top of the card, and then move the pop-up section into position as if the image were lifted on the card, and that section that's revealed, just lightly draw around that area, that aperture, with a pencil. Then we know where to stamp our greeting. Then using a greeting stamp of your choice, I'm using one from Do Crafts which says wishing you a Merry Christmas. I'm just making sure that I ink it up well because I don't want to make a mistake, and this is where I get a little bit paranoid, making sure that everything's inked up, my hands don't shake, that I don't drop the ink pad onto the card, I don't get it on my fingers. I really am not the world's greatest stamper, particularly working in black and white, and I'm going to do my best to do this in one hit. So cleaning up my fingers before and the ink pad before I try to put it down on the card. And then lining it up with the pencil line that we had, I'm just going to centre it in that aperture. I'm doing my best to make sure that the whole stamp is pressed down well, and then voila! Phew! So that's my greeting stamped, but I also want to stamp a few little snowflakes. So I'm just going to take my smallest snowflake and I'm just going to dot a few of those around about where the greeting is. And I'm going to put that to one side before I rub out the pencil line so that the ink dries, and obviously you don't want to smudge it now that I've got it all right. And I'm going to stamp my image next. So this could be any image stamp, but I'm using this one from Gorgeous, which has got a lovely snowy tree and fox. So carefully ink up your stamp so you don't get any on the edges, and then press into position on your cardstock, and then allow it to dry before you begin any colouring. Because I've used a permanent ink to stamp my image, I'm not going to be using pro markers. I'm going to be using watercolour pencils to colour my image. So I quite like them because you can add the shading before you add the water and make your job quite a lot easier. I just thought I'd zoom in a little bit so you can get a better look at what I'm doing. And there we go. And as you can see, when I'm colouring in the hair here, I'm just leaving a few areas where I want the highlights, Again with the tree trunk I'm leaving the centre area because I'll blend the colour out into that area. I'm adding the shading on the edges of the dress and where the scarf crosses the dress. So everywhere I want to highlight, I'm starting with a lighter shade of the watercolour pencil and then colouring in darker where I want the shading. So just remember, this could be any of the Christmas images that you have in your collection, and I'm sure you've got plenty. And I'm just going to make sure that I just stick to a fairly tonal palette. So just using blues and teals and a couple of greys, and that way I'll get quite a nice effect with the blue card base. And I'm just using a very light grey to give some shading, and I'm going to add in a little bit of a hill on the background. So once you're happy with all your colouring in, then it's time to take out your water. Mine looks a bit black on the camera, but you can see it isn't when I put it onto the paper. So I like to keep a piece of tissue paper that I can keep drying my brush on if it gets a little bit too wet. And I'm just carefully blending out the lightest of the colours first. And then I'm going to work my way over the entire image. So just gradually using the water to blend out the watercolour pencils and to create a lovely watercolour effect. So let your image dry and then use some double-sided tape to mount it onto the black frame. Now I'm just using a fine black marker to add in the snow line that I made with the grey watercolour pencil, and one of my favourite things to do is to add stitching around the edges of things. If I'm not using ink, then I'm definitely using stitching. So I'm stitching around the area that we cut and folded with the craft knife, so the actual pop-up section in the middle of the card. And just zooming out a little bit so I can keep this in shot, and then going right around the very edge of the card front. God, I wish I could do it this fast in real life. And then finally I'm creating what looks like a double layer of stitching, and this time going around the aperture, and I'm matching my stitches up as if it looks like a double row of running stitches. And I just thought that another little row of stitching across the top of the tab just finished that area off. So the stitching forms a little bit of a frame around the main image when the image is flat. So now that the ink is dry on the base of the card, just remove those little guide pencil marks that we made earlier. And then we're ready to work out where we're going to stamp on the little tab or tag that's going to pull out and lift our pop-up slider into place. So first of all, we just want to attach the little tab or tag into position, and I'm just putting on two little bits of double-sided tape on the 3/4 of an inch segment of the pop-up, and unfortunately I've gone a little bit off camera doing this. I've used two tiny bits of double-sided tape, but equally you could use a little piece or a little strip of repositionable tape, and I will show you this in a second. I know this is a bit off camera, but all I'm doing is lining up the base of the card, and you can see here what I've done. So I'm attaching the base of that piece of card, and it sticks out evenly either side of that section. So when the tab is pulled, it doesn't pop out of the centre section of the card. It's a little bit bigger than the aperture we cut. So now I can work out when I pull this tab where I'm going to be stamping. But first I'm going to cut away, and I think you'll remember this from the beginning of the video. I just like to leave a little bit extra at the top of this tab and then cut it away once I'm sure, once it's stuck into position, so that it's exactly the same length as the top of the card. And then lift or pull the tab, so I'm just lining it up on the base card and pushing that into position, and I know the position that the tab's going to sit in because of the stamped image. And the piece that you've got left at the top is the piece where we can stamp another greeting. So I'm just lining it up and making sure that it's straight, and then I'm just going to use my pencil to trace along the top of the card. So I know now that once the card is positioned, that area I could have another greeting. So I'm just releasing it from the main card. You'll have less trouble if you've used a repositionable tape. And then I know the area where I'm going to stamp my second greeting. And I'm using the same set of stamps, but this time I'm using Let It Snow. To round the corners of the top of the tab slider. Then we want to mark the position for the hole ready to insert the ribbon on the tab slider. So I'm just lining it up on the blue cardstock, and then I'm going to flip it over and use my pencil just to create a little mark, and then I'm going to punch a hole ready for the ribbon. And I managed to do this entirely off camera, but you can see the result. So I just lined it up with my crocodile and then punched a hole over that pencil mark that I made earlier. So as you can see, once this is in position, it will be in the right place just to have a little tail of ribbons at the top of the tag. So now I'm ready to stamp in the area that I marked earlier. So back to the black archival ink and my second greeting. Again, making sure that I ink it up well and using my pencil mark as a guide, centering it on that top of the tag. I'm doing well so far. And then again with that little snowflake, I'm just randomly stamping at the top of the tag. And I thought I'd just put one final snowflake right over the hole where the ribbon's going to sit. Make sure your ink is dry before you add a little bit more stitching around the edge of your tag. And so long as you begin and end your stitching past the pencil line that you made, you know that it's not going to show. The bottom part, is covered up by the top of your card, so you just need to go a little bit past that pencil line. And then we're ready to put the card together. So you need to use double-sided tape to do this, and I'm going right around the very edge of the card with double-sided tape, and I've put 2 strips on the little 3/4 of an inch tab ready to attach the tag. So begin by removing the 2 strips of tape at the bottom on the 3/4 of an inch strip, and then line it up so that it sits centrally over the tab pop-up that you created, and it should be flush with the top of the card, and the edge of the tab should be nowhere near the double-sided tape that's going to join the front to the back of the card. So if it touches double-sided tape, it's going to interfere with the smooth slide as you lift the pop-up into position. So you can see I've got plenty of room here at the edge of the card so that it's not going to interfere with that slider. And then you're going to remove those 3 pieces of tape from the top and the bottom and the 2 sides of the card. So line up the top and the bottom pieces and press, and just check that your slider is working freely before you attach your main image to your card top. So just put double-sided tape. Again, be careful to avoid the very edge of the slider, and I'm using 4 little strips of tape, the top and bottom one just shy of the score lines. And then position your image so when the card's flat, it's central in that little slider area. And then when you pull the tab, it sits nicely in position. Then I'm going to take a coordinating piece of ribbon. I'm going to use this wider blue one, and I'm just taking roughly about 7 inches, folding it in half, popping it through, and then looping the ends through and just trimming diagonally to avoid the ribbon fraying. And that creates the little pull for our tab slider card. And then I'm just adding a little bit of sparkle, so I've got some Cosmic Shimmer pearl glue to make some little faux pearls in the centre of my large snowflakes, and then all the other snowflakes I've got a turquoise stickles, and then I'm adding a little bit of diamond stickles to the snow, the stars on the dress and the snow on the tree, and a few little dots on her hat and on the topiary tree. And I want to add a little bit of sparkle to my tag, so I'm just lifting the card into position, and just the only thing that you need to be aware of is obviously you don't want these little dots of glitter raised, so I'm actually pressing the nozzle down onto the card to keep them flat, just to add a few dots of glitter but without raising, making anything raised. And then you're going to need to leave the card in position obviously while these little dots of glitter dry. So to recap, for my Christmas sparkle I used 2 stickles, diamond and turquoise, and some Cosmic Shimmer PVA pearl. I used a Simply Gorgeous stamp, which is foxgloves, and my greetings were from DoCraft, and they're Daisy and Dandelion Christmas greetings. So there you have it, all dried, one gorgeous, or should I say 2 gorgeous Christmas cards, and the other image that I've used is Winter Friend. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to like it and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. I'd love to have you join me as I bring you some more Christmas ideas for 2013. I don't know how many I'll fit in till Santa arrives, but I'll do my best to get a few more up and online to help inspire you as you make your Christmas cards this year. Put a couple of links at the end of the credits for 2 other Christmas projects that are on my YouTube channel that I thought you might like to take a look at while you're in the Christmas mood. So until next time, thank you for watching.